Welcome everybody to today's webinar, 10 Tips for Achieving One-to-One Relationships on Social. I'm Gina Mueller, Director of Marketing at Insightful, joined today by my friend and co-host, Katie Ivey, the Director of Client Success at Insightful, and known around town for rocking out the best blazers in the Insightful office.
Why, thank you. Why, thank you, Gina.
In case you're interested, today she is wearing a pink blazer. I like to say it in theme for Valentine's Day.
Yeah, absolutely. Everything today is Valentine's themed, as you will notice as the webinar progresses.
So Katie and I actually first met here in Atlanta during the intersections of ExactTarget, Salesforce, and Pardot. Myself on the ExactTarget side and Katie on the Pardot side. I like to joke with her that I liked her so much over at Pardot that I couldn't help but follow her over to the Insightful swim team, and I'm really happy that we both joined this team last year. So today we're both in the Atlanta Insightful office in what we like to refer to as the Space Pod room. So just wanted to give you a little bit of a look into where this webinar is actually being hosted to you from. And if you don't already follow us on Twitter, I encourage you to follow Katie and I. Katie, a lot of her tweets are around client success and client experiences, and my expertise is in digital marketing and go-to-market strategy. So follow, tweet us, ask us any questions during or after the webinar. And then speaking of questions, if you do have questions specific for the webinar and you want us to address them at the end, there is, if you go to your GoToWebinar control panel, at the bottom there's a questions tab, and you can actually just insert your questions in there for us. We are going to keep everyone muted just for the flow of today's webinar, but if you have any questions, please insert them there, and we'll try to answer them real time or at the end. So today we're talking about how to build one-to-one relationships on social with your prospects and customers. And we will walk you through a handful of our favorite tips and tricks for building successful relationships. And not that you would expect anything less, but yes, we have tied these tips to a Valentine's Day theme. That's right, we're bringing you tips that not only help in your professional relationships, but you might even learn some tips for your personal relationships. So get ready if you're single. There's going to be a lot of talk about online dating today. So Valentine's Day is this weekend. In case you didn't know, maybe go buy your loved one some flowers or chocolates or something this weekend. Maybe go to dinner. And I love the topic of Valentine's Day, not because I'm a super big fan of the holiday, but because it gives me an excuse to talk about relationships. And I find it really fun to compare customer relationships with personal relationships. Especially for today's modern marketer, one of the #1 important things they need to be doing today is building lasting relationships and earning opportunities to prove that their brands are the perfect fit. And to do this, they need to communicate in a way that sparks interest, cultivates trust, and keeps these customers and prospects around for the long haul. So this modern marketer, most of their customers or target audience, and everyone just in general, we're around reading blog posts, articles, Twitter, Facebook, we're all over the place. And when we're on all these different social channels and news outlets, we're forming opinions based on what your brand is saying. And a lot of it relates back to if I will comment or engage with your post or what you're sharing with me, is how does it relate to me as a person? Everyone is very focused on this idea of me. How will this make me look? If I reshare this tweet, what will happen? If I comment on this blog post, how will I be viewed? So I like to always add in that when you're creating these relationships, step back, and although you have goals as marketers or just for your business, you want to really, in order to build the relationships, you need to provide value for that end user. So on the other end of the spectrum is today's modern single, who goes out to find, their one true love on these dating sites. And just like the modern marketer, they need to build several one-to-one relationships before they find that one lasting relationship. Whereas the modern marketer, yes, they're also building several one-to-one relationships, but they need to build several relationships and not just that one true love relationship. And that doesn't mean that they could pay any less attention to those true loves once they actually convert. you have to still give them a lot of attention, or else the relationship could tarnish or turn for the worse, or you could just be forgotten about. So how does this marketer take the idea of building these relationships on social? And this is really where we start to go into today. We have 10 tips for you that are kind of around this Valentine's Day relationship building theme. And it's walking you through the beginning steps of creating relationships all the way through the end. So the first tip for you is predict your perfect match. Today's society is obsessed with time. And in order to save time with building relationships, you've got to have the tools that allow you to spend time focusing on those right relationships. And this whole idea of predicting human behavior isn't as far-fetched as it used to be. Today we predict human behavior all over the place. eHarmony uses a prediction tool. I believe it's 29, I think they call it dimensions of compatibility. And they use this to match you up with the people that are you're most likely to hit it off with. And I think everyone's really familiar with this idea behind eHarmony. You're going on, you're saving time to find the person you love. We actually have one of the girls in the marketing department, Hillary Byers. She's our content marketing manager, and she actually is engaged to someone via OkCupid. And one of the funniest things is, one of the big reasons why she joined OkCupid, it was to save time. She actually set up a system where she would set up just coffee dates would be the first date. And it was all to save time to find that one true love, that one real relationship. And she did find that relationship and is getting married this fall. But we as marketers are trying to achieve that same thing, but on a larger scale. Several true loves we're trying to find. And to do that, eHarmony, we have created over basically an insight pool. It's a similar thing. We are helping marketers improve their odds of predicting who is likely to be interested in their product. And like eHarmony uses 29 dimensions of compatibility, Insight Pool uses, we have an algorithm that does thousands of variables based on interest in order to discover not only who will be interested in you, but who will go out and advocate and promote your business. So by predicting who you will hit it off with and how likely you are engaged to promote what you learn and win, Insight Pool can really help you to achieve this. And taking a little bit of a deeper dive into how we do this, data science is a really big part of how we predict human behavior. And this whole idea of predicting human behavior is pretty crazy, because a few years ago, I don't think we would have thought it was possible. And today, I feel like we're still very much only on the beginning of predicting actual actions, but we have found out a lot in a short period of time, and so much that Insight Pool actually recently hired a rocket scientist. And yes, you heard right, that's a rocket scientist. The day I heard this, that Devin came up to me and told me this, I was like, whoa, why do we need a rocket scientist at Insight Pool? What are they going to do for us? And it's funny, because really the concept is the same. They're going out and predicting dark space and trying to predict where the rocket will go by this dark space that they know nothing about, all of this. And it kind of compares to this data that we have all this data and we don't know anything about it, but by analyzing all of the different patterns, we can then make predictions on what you're likely to do. The main difference between rocket science and social media data science being that humans are completely irrational and we make decisions emotionally, so it just throws things off, but those patterns still come out, and we're still able to predict who's likely to want to hear about your product and your services. So moving on to the second tip, you like them, they like you. It should go without saying that people you engage with should actually be interested in your company and see that you're providing a real value for them. Same goes for dating. It's difficult to force yourself to force someone to like you. It's actually impossible to force someone to like you. Same goes with a brand. So don't waste your time on those people. You need to, in order to save time, you need to be able to identify who those people are that will actually want to be involved in that relationship. And first impressions are so important. Taking a quote from Mr. Carnegie here, the only way to influence someone is to talk about what they want and show them how to get it. back to this whole entire me idea. So always ask yourself whenever you're setting a marketing goal or trying to get people to fill out a lead form for an ebook or whatever your initiative is, am I providing value for this person? What am I doing for them? What are they getting out of this? And as marketers, it's hard because we have all of these goals of, we need to fuel the funnel, we need to bring in more leads, and it's hard to step back and say, okay, wait, a bunch of customers are asking this question. Can I shape my next ebook around that? Can I help answer that question? And then once I can answer that question, can I link it back and go and tell them about that ebook that I created just for them? And then I wanted to share a fun stat with you that the Insight Pool team found out from our data, and that is kind of playing on this whole ego idea and the me, and that is that if you include ego-boosting language, you are 35.5% more likely to, the person is 35.5% more likely to engage versus the 29.6. So when I say ego-boosting, I'm meaning you saying like, hey, Tim, as a B2B marketer, I thought you'd be interested in this. Or, hey, I realized you really like cats. I like them too. Here's an ebook on cats. So I just wanted to share that fun stat with you guys. So for our third tip today is find common interests. In the digital world, opposites attract. Most advanced social tools or services are now leveraging interest and social graphs to help companies find these influencers in their space. And identification is really only the starting point. The key is to not only identify, but then not only identify people that seem like good prospects, but we need to identify the people that are actually good prospects. And we do this by looking at who they follow, what they talk about, what activities they're doing, and find the overlap. So say like you can find some overlap in some person's really into sports, and you happen to have a use case that is, say their brand is B2B, and it's tying this B2B example with this interest they have around sports. And how cool would it be to share that with them and say like, hey, I noticed, I know you like sports and this, or don't even tell them, just share it with them, and it'll grab their attention. Or same thing back with my cats example. Not to label myself as the crazy cat lady, but but I do love my cat examples. Provide them with something with cats on it. I love receiving cat stickers and cat pictures of anything. So Katie, I think you were going to go into a little bit of an example from one of our customers now, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is one of my favorite stories to talk about. And some of it's Insight Pool related. Quite a bit of it is actually not just talking about using social in very similar ways to what Gina and I are describing throughout the webinar. You're going to see some logos here that will look familiar to you. If you guys weren't all on listen-only mode, I might try to embarrass you and ask how many of you are actually on Tinder. You're safe, don't worry, you're all in listen-only mode, so I won't ask any embarrassing questions. The Hawks are clients of us here at Insight Pool, and they've been doing a lot of really fun and really innovative things across social in a variety of different ways. I know that we also have some folks on the line that are here local, so I hope that you've been following them. They're having quite the amazing season, although last night was a bit of a tough loss, so we won't bring that one back up. But they ran a really cool event back at the beginning of January. It was called Swipe Right Night, so playing off this whole theme of Tinder. And really the premise of the event was that matchmaking with the right audience happens both on and offline. The whole point of this particular event was to encourage their fans to connect with each other using Tinder. For any of you that maybe have been out of the dating game for a little while, Tinder is just an app that allows individuals to connect. It's kind of the next generation of what you would think of as maybe eHarmony, Match.com, those types of platforms. But they wanted to get folks that are connecting on Tinder, online, actually connecting in real life at a game that was happening on January 7th. To do this, really, the whole foundation was that they used Insight Pool to target influencers in Atlanta that had a love of basketball, that were connected to a lot of different local events, would have a high interest in engaging with events here locally. And then they also looked for folks that were connected to a variety of different online matchmaking sites to do that initial layer of finding those right individuals and folks that were going to have the right interests. Then once they had identified them, they were able to engage with those influencers, which they did that a couple of different ways. Of course, there was a whole invitation aspect where they wanted to get folks actually out to the game, invite them to the event, talk about how much fun it was going to be and how much they would want to be there. But really at the core, all of the communication was geared around being extremely organic and very genuine. And I think if we look at the next slide, you'll see just some examples of what the conversation sort of grew to be. This was a pretty big win for the Hawks in general. They were able to get just, of course, incredible publicity on Twitter specifically. Just about every sports channel out there picked this up. A lot of other teams have tried to sort of copy and do something similar since then. I would encourage you guys, if you're interested in some of the more innovative, creative things that brands like the Hawks may be doing, even just go do a quick search for Swipe Right ATL. That was the hashtag they used during the event. You'll find some very entertaining conversations around the topic, but it was definitely a good example of being able to find common interests and use that really as the launching point for a really creative campaign to drive a lot of one-on-one engagement and those one-on-one relationships, which really ties into our fourth tip as well, which is all about finding a good conversationalist. I hear people talk about the whole concept of influencer identification all the time. It's definitely a hot topic and something that companies and brands are trying to really crack the code on. Most of the models that I've seen out there simply don't work because really the layer, kind of where that process ends so often, is just that process of identifying common interest. Really for us here, what we're discovering, the more clients that we engage with, the more work we do in this space, we're discovering that finding the right influencer goes well beyond just finding someone with your right interests, but they also have to have a high likelihood to actually engage with your brand or syndicate your content. Think of it as a combination of both interest as well as really social activity. And Gina's already mentioned that we've got some great data scientists that are analyzing all kinds of data here at Insightful. We shared a couple of the stats. Two that are on the screen here are ones that I find really interesting. But of course, this is a massive challenge, based on things that I can see in the social space. How do I know not just who's going to be interested in my topics, but who's actually going to have a high likelihood or high propensity to interact with my brand? This first stat that you see here says, if someone has customized their background image on Twitter, they're actually over 20% more likely to reciprocate an engagement. The next one says if someone's Twitter description is over 76 characters and they have a link in their description, they're actually over 30% more likely to reciprocate an engagement. And these may sound a little bit ancillary or random, but this all goes back to, of course, we've analyzed a lot of data to come to these statistics, but it all drills down to the insight that if someone's proactive enough to really custom build out their profile, then they're both invested in that particular social network, and then they're at least mildly tech savvy. So those are feeding into those numbers of the higher likelihood for those individuals to actually reciprocate. I think the last sort of stat or key finding that we've had on that particular point, it goes to the point around including product price. We found that if you include a product's price point in an at mention, you're actually 47.3% less likely to receive an engagement. This is a mistake that I've seen many brands make when they're trying to drive these one-on-one conversations. The conversations come across as incredibly salesy, very spammy, because it's geared towards pushing a price point or a sale that happens long before there's any real interaction or any one-on-one relationships that have been built on that social channel specifically, which really does tie into our fifth tip that we have today, and it's get real, don't try so hard. This probably aligns a little bit to the whole concept of connecting this both to the online as well as the offline space. I've been out of the dating game for a little while. I've been married a little over 6 years, but I'm sure that we can all think of a time when someone has tried just a little bit too hard to capture our attention. Confident people, I would say, are really sexy. Insecure, desperate people, definitely not so sexy. And if I had to pick one big takeaway from this topic, if I had to pick one thing for you to really remember from the webinar, it would be this topic, which is so simple. It's that you're talking to an actual person. This is a human being on the other end of this social channel. The most successful and effective social conversations are done in an extremely personalized way, which means that as a brand, you cannot sound desperate.
And not only in a personalized way, but a lot of times I find that marketers are afraid to be themselves or sound human. They feel like it's a little scary to like make something casual or have everything not capitalized and with the perfect commas and everything.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I would agree with that 100%. I've worked with a lot of brands, especially in these last couple of months, and we have some clients, and I've worked with some brands that are driving killer conversations, great conversions across social, and they're seeing it make a massive impact to their bottom line. I've also worked with brands that are really struggling to understand, how does social even fit into their business model? Can they even drive genuine conversations and connections there? And this really does tend to be the heart of the issue for most of those brands that we're seeing find a ton of success, as well as those that are struggling, is really missing this whole dynamic of it being an individual and a real personal interaction that's taking place. Which I think that we've got one stat on the next screen, Gina, that's a little bit interesting, and this is one that I find surprises people a little bit. And we're talking about the whole concept of one-on-one engagement, so one-on-one interactions that would be happening across social. And we've actually found that if you don't include a hashtag in your tweet, you're 31.1% more likely to engage in conversation. That number goes down if there's a hashtag used. And this I know goes against some of our instincts as marketers. We've been trained that hashtags are this sort of be-all and end-all to get your message out. But you can think of it a little bit as the concept of shouting. If we're trying to amplify our message on our social channels and give as many people access to that as possible, hashtags are a great way to do that. But if we're driving a one-on-one conversation, if I'm walking up to Gina and I want to invite her to an event, most likely I'm not going to scream some type of advertisement about that event. It's going to be a very personalized conversation.
Unless you're adding in a funny hashtag like I love kittens.
Back to the cat example. Unless you go for the kittens, we'll say you get a pass if there are kittens in the hashtag. Really, on this point, as a general rule of thumb, what I would encourage everyone to do is just ask yourself, is this how real relationships or real conversations happen? If the answer to that question is ever no, then that's really not how conversations and relationships on social are going to work either. It all aligns really to that piece at the end of the day. Which connects really to our sixth point as well, or our tip for today, which is give before you get. I think this is a piece that resonates with all of us, and it's very similar to the one that we touched on, but just in a little bit more depth. We're working to connect with people in a way that makes them feel special. Think human nature. We all love to be loved, noticed, acknowledged. I think we may even have that quote on our next slide. So think about how can we use social as a vessel to really make this happen, to make people feel important, paid attention to. And there's a ton of ways that we could do this. A few that come to mind for me that I've seen be successful, both when I think about growing my own personal social network, as well as what I've seen working well for brands. Really simple things. Asking a question. Share something that someone said with your network, with your friends. Talk positively about them. Talk them up the same way that you would brag about someone in a social setting. It's really easy to make that happen on social. Congratulate them on a special accomplishment. None of this is really rocket science. No pun intended, back to our rocket scientists that we have here internally. But we have a tendency to make it seem so much more complicated than it is, because we think of social media as some type of mysterious medium. Really, at the end of the day, it's just human communication, human interaction, which most of us understand really well, I think, how to do.
Yeah, so true. So I'll take the next tip. It's one of my favorites. It's getting serious. So it's getting serious. So it's time to get serious about your social strategy. I think one of the biggest challenges around building social relationships is having a good mix of fun, thought-provoking content that is actually of interest to your customers. So creating content and a brand voice that resonates with both your prospects and customers can be hard, but it's essential in creating these lasting relationships. A few of the things my team does in order to achieve this content goal is creating a content and social calendars, creating social and content calendars. God, that's a tongue twister. And making sure that our team has a consistent strategy across these calendars so that we know who's responsible for what, and we can really stay organized and actually execute on different deadlines and be providing not only great new content, but then also executing it and sharing it with the right people. So Mike Beauchamp is our social media manager, and he keeps a real high level. Well, first, I guess I'll back up and start with our team uses Trello to organize this content. And we have this as our daily to-do task, and we love Trello. I love it. I've just started using it in the past few months, and it's really kind of become the backbone of our to-do list for marketing. And then Mike Beauchamp, our social media manager, he takes an even higher level step into this social media content management, and he uses a big Excel sheet to use it to organize all of his tweets and all of his social posts and LinkedIn posts and everything that he's sharing that we're creating on the content side. And then he uses Buffer to actually share this information. And I actually haven't been in Buffer as much as him. He's definitely the expert on it, but it's one of the great tools that we love on our team. So no matter what systems you decide to use, it's really important when you're getting serious to your content and relationship strategy to have a system in place, just to make sure that everyone can see what's happening from a high level and everyone can be working towards executing those same goals. Because if one person is misaligned, then the whole team could fail with launching a new ebook or a webinar or whatever it is. Our 8th tip here is stick around, it's worth it. So true one-to-one engagement on social takes time. It's not going to happen overnight. But the more time that you devote to the right conversation, first off, the better your time will be spent, and the more you will have to grow your audience and to drive deeper relationships. So once you do, cultivate these relationships, stick around for them. Don't forget about the people that already have told you that they love you. It's easier and cheaper to keep them than to go out and find new people. So make sure to show love to those who love you. And then on that note, I'll pass it off to you for 9.
Yeah, for sure. So our 9th tip, you can see by the countdown, we're getting close to the end. So I would say we're really getting to the good stuff now, in my opinion. Who doesn't like a good love story? So now we're going to talk about get hitched, really on to sealing the deal and what that looks like for brands and for companies. At the end of the day, really one-to-one relationships on social should turn prospects into customers and then customers into advocates. That's what we're all working towards. That's the end goal of literally everything that we're doing and driving around social. And the whole concept here is once a customer becomes a true advocate of your brand and truly connected to you in a relational level, then a request from you becomes very different. It's much more of a friendly ask than it would be a pushy sales pitch, which is how so much of what brands are doing today on social tends to come across. Again, going back to Gina's point of me, it being all about the brand, that feels very salesy. That feels like something that most of us as individuals don't relate to, don't feel pulled into. But when we can actually turn them into those advocates, then we suddenly have much more of a platform and an opportunity to ask for the things that we want, the types of conversions, but to do it again in a way that's much more genuine and is very relational based as opposed to really jumping there from the get-go. The whole goal really is to make this feel like a win-win. We've got our pretty little wedding picture here. Who doesn't love a good wedding? I know Gina's already mentioned Hillary that's in the process of planning hers. So I think it's such a fun process and a fun season. But think about the last wedding that each of you went to. Of course, us girls, we like to think that weddings are all about us. But really, we know it's about both parties, even though it's hard for us to admit that. But think about the last wedding you went to. Can you remember one where one side of the couple that was getting hitched was miserable and the other one was ecstatic? Probably not. I guess technically it's possible, but when I think of the weddings that I've been to, and certainly when I think back to my own wedding, they're all made up of two incredibly happy people. It's the definition of what a win-win really should look like. It's the definition of both parties feeling like, hey, I'm coming out on top here. Like this is such a massive win for me. And if both individuals feel that going into a marriage, then clearly you're setting yourself up for success. And that's what this should feel like when we talk about brand engagement, brand interaction. This should feel like a win-win for both the company or the brand as well as the individual that's being pulled into that conversation or into that conversion. Which is going to align to our last of our 10 tips, which is keep it fresh. I think this is applicable as we talk about the whole concept of marriage And even as we try to leave you with a few tips that may translate into your personal life as well, I'm sure most of us know married couples that are blissfully happy. I like to think of myself as fitting into that category, just as a side note. But we also probably know a lot of married couples that are anything but blissfully happy. Great marriages don't just happen without work, without attention. The same thing goes for great one-to-one relationships that we're cultivating on social. Just because someone likes you now doesn't mean they're going to like you forever. I think that Gina mentioned earlier on the webinar, but I have a background in marketing automation. That was really my world before I moved over to Insightful. And marketing automation is primarily email-based. And in marketing automation, we talk about the concept of nurturing all the time. Most marketers really embrace email as a natural channel to nurture relationships, to nurture them over longer periods of time. But I feel like this idea is really still catching on in the social space. A lot of, even the companies that I've worked with tend to view social as more one-off in nature, things that are very campaign-based, that there's one specific objective that we're after, and then the conversation ends. But think about the small things that we do today to stay connected to our spouse or people in our lives or friendships that we're cultivating. The small things that we do to make our friends feel special or feel important or to build those relationships over time. Some of my clients call it surprise and delight when they're doing those types of things on social, where they literally are looking for small ways to make their customers or their advocates, their influencers feel special, feel important, literally to surprise and delight them via social with some type of small action. Building relationships on social is hard, so it's important for us to not let them slip away just because we may get lazy or not have the long-term strategy in place to be able to continue to make sure that we're keeping it fresh, paying attention from a nurturing perspective. Mm-hmm. With that, Gina, I'll pass it back your way.
Yeah. There was, so now that we're done with the 10 tips, there was one other thing I wanted to share with you, and that's just we've been having a lot of big news, I feel like, going on lately. It's been a pretty crazy week. But last week, I did want to share with you, in case you hadn't heard, that Google announced that tweets will now be indexed on Google. So I just, in case you missed this, wanted to reiterate how important your social strategy is. This news is just one of several different things that have gone live lately, but your tweets and your social conversations are so important, and now Google is saying they're important, and they'll be helping with your SEO. They'll be helping amplify your messaging. So leverage your social relationships in the right way. Have a social plan, and be proactive. Don't just wait for people to come to you.
Yeah, for sure. I would agree with that.
So I think now at this point we'll open it up to some questions. I do think we did have a question or two come in. Katie, do you want to take the first one?
Yeah, sure. We got a great question. This is one that I actually like to hear from Van. We appreciate you speaking up. I think that this question was posed back when we were talking about price points and our opinion on whether or not to include those in conversations on social. But Van said, speaking of price points, I love the Insightful platform so much. When will the price point come down to where the little guys can play in your pool? I love the play on words there, first of all, so I appreciate that. We'd love to connect. There's definitely a number of things that are happening in the background as the platform evolves. So I'd love to connect one-on-one, find out more about what you're looking for, and be able to address that as well. There's also some really exciting things in the news today that actually just went live on TechCrunch, I think about 6 minutes before this webinar. So I would say maybe it wasn't timed perfectly from our perspective, but would encourage you guys to check out TechCrunch and some of the cool things that are happening. It's around a particular acquisition from yours truly, not as in myself, but from Insightful, that I think may also be able to play into that question as well, Van.
Yeah.
Tina, do we have any other questions?
That's actually, no, those are actually the only questions. The others were just some sound support and things. So if any other questions do come up, feel free to tweet Katie and I.
We're big fans of Twitter, so we'd love to connect.
Yes, definitely. And thank you for joining us today, and we hope to see you on another webinar in the future. I will be following up with an email with the recording, and we'll be posting the slides to SlideShare, so I'll share a link with you in that too. But thanks for joining us today.
Thanks, guys.